Okay, NCOIL team. Welcome to the last day of summer camp. Congratulations on making it to the main event, the Property and Casualty Committee. I'll be your host, Forrest Bennett from Oklahoma. I represent House District 92, home to the Paycom Arena, where the Oklahoma City Thunder recently won a world championship. Thank you. I would extend my condolences to Indiana, but champions do not do that. So I do not know who carries the liability insurance for the convention center that we have in Oklahoma City and the arena, but I had the pleasure as the legislator for the district to be in the Champions Parade. It was exciting. In order to get my free shirt that I got to wear for the parade, I had to sign a waiver. I did not read that waiver. But they made you do that first before you could get your lanyard and get your t-shirt. So I was laser focused on that, not laser focused on hydrating. So enjoyed the parade, cheered quite a bit, got off of the float at the end, experienced a bit of heat exhaustion. I went inside, I explained that to a staff member who did everything in his power to make sure that I was okay, up until the point that I said, and by the way, I signed the waiver, at which point he said, oh, okay, great, and walked away. So I just want whoever carries that to know that they are doing their part at risk mitigation. So if you represent Paycom or the Convention Center in Oklahoma City, please send them a letter and say you guys are doing a great job. Okay, all the fun stuff's out of the way. Now we can argue. But before that, I need to get a motion to waive the quorum requirement. Can I get that motion? Motioned and seconded. Thank you. All in favor? I will now entertain a motion to approve the April 26th and June 9th, 2025 meeting minutes, and then a second. All in favor? Thank you. The first item on our agenda today is a continued discussion and potential consideration on the NCOIL Insurer's use of aerial images model act. You can find that act in the NCOIL Bible. The model has been through some significant changes after being discussed for about a year now. Based on discussions just this morning, the model may or may not be ready for a vote, but we will have a robust conversation, I know, and then we will figure out what we want to do moving forward. With that, I'd like to turn the floor over to the model sponsors, who I would encourage to do a UFC-style fight to see whose amendments would win, but they declined. So we will go with Representative LaBeouf of Massachusetts first. Representative, you're recognized.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And no, we will not be having we don't have the liability insurance for the UFC fight today. But do want to thank everyone for being here and listening to this discussion. I think the model is in a very strong place right now to be considered. For those of you who want more information, you can view it in your binders on page 128 and then the website and the app. We've had a very positive interim meeting and many discussions last month. We made a couple of changes to the model, specifically 4A and 4D, regarding the standards that the repairs must adhere to. And then also since that time, Rep. Lampton and I did have one more amendment to offer up to you today that's been printed out and distributed. This relates to Section 4D of the model regarding the amount of time of the name insured has to cure the defects originally underlying in the non-renewal notice. And the real rationale behind that is we recognize that different states have different notice requirements in different time periods. And we want to make sure that however the model is, there is consistency. This was something that was brought to our attention by NAMIC and the APCIA. But one addition we did also make to this is that we added a drafting note to encourage states to amend their non-renewal laws to ensure that the notice period is at least 60 days. We know there are some states that have a 30-day requirement, which I personally, and I think many of you think is too short. So we think that amendment together with the drafting note is a reasonable compromise. I think the amendment gets us a good place today with the model. And of course, you can bring it back to your states and make changes. I recognize that different states have different approaches to how they deal with residential versus commercial. And I know there's been some concerns brought up about that, and that is something that I think each is up at the discretion of each legislature. But I think as of now, it's a very solid foundation with consumer protections and allowing us to have the guardrails and certainty when using a new technology. and I would encourage the committee to adopt and support the model today. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Lambton?
Thank you, Chair. I'm way over here. I want to thank the committee and our industry partners for their conversations, and I do agree with the amendment brought forward. You know, Ohio's notice of 30 days, in my opinion, is just too short of a time frame. So I plan on working on that back home. But I do agree that it needs to be consistent with each state and their current regulation as far as non-renewal notice. However, I would like to offer up a couple of more items that I feel are reasonable. One being a carve out for excess and surplus lines and commercial lines. As I go through this and hear the discussions, I believe that the intent is mainly around personal lines or rental dwellings. So I think that's a reasonable request to carve out commercial and excess and surplus. And secondly, the item in the bill about pictures of sent with the notice, the request has been made that we make these photos available upon request. I also feel like that's reasonable, and but we don't want to extend or limit the time for the person, the policyholder, to respond, waiting on photos to properly or completely identify what the issue is. So I see both sides of that. In my state, most of us, our consumers have agents, and the agents are the ones making these contacts and explaining things to the customers. In other states, I understand that a lot of the insurance consumers are direct, so they don't have these agents, they don't have these contacts. So it is a different scenario, and so that, I think, brings a different dynamic to the table. So I would ask that we at least continue to discuss and consider those additional things. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. And I just want to, before we hear from the industry, say we've got a bipartisan group of co-authors here, and I wish America could see how cordial and collaborative you've been. And I think that we should point out that, you know, it is kind of remarkable anytime folks from across the country can get together and put together something that substantially works. What we are discussing today are just sort of minutia of this, and so I just want to applaud everybody who's been involved in this for being at the table and putting your best foot forward. That said, it's going to be a lot harder for people to say mean things now, isn't it? So the first person to not say anything mean will be Hillary Segura of APCIA.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Hillary Segura, APCIA. I promise not to say anything mean. I know you've heard from me before that we do have concerns with the model. I do appreciate the sponsors working on it, the co-sponsor, for making some changes. It's moving in a better direction. I still do have some concerns, which I would like to go through once again. I appreciate Representative Lambton's proposed amendment that the model should only apply to authorized or admitted insurers. Most states don't have regulatory authority of surplus lines insurers' underwriting processes, forms, and pricing. And many of the insurance companies that provide loss control services to prospective and current commercial customers who tend to be more sophisticated insurance purchasers. So therefore, adding the imagery burdens upon commercial insurers or surplus lines, that makes sense to me, and we would be supportive of that amendment change. But I will say, and I know I've said this before, that we're creating a different process and different rules for what is essentially the underwriting process, which already exists, whether you're using aerial imagery or whether you have an adjuster going up and climbing up onto the roof. It's just a different way of getting the same information, and this model creates different rules, different processes for what is essentially the same concept. I do want to make a couple of comments throughout the model. Section 3, I would recommend and suggest that there be changes to the definition of airborne platform. I would suggest that it read that it's captured from satellite or aircraft. Aerial imagery does not, and that aerial imagery does not include images captured via unmanned aerial systems or vehicles. I think it's appropriate to kind of clear up what's aerial imagery versus kind of a drone. I would also say in section 4, we had some concerns with the language in 4A regarding including the specific standards that any repairs must adhere to. Providing specific standards that the property owner may take to bring a risk into underwriting compliance would be extremely challenging and expensive. Carriers don't want to be in the position of advising policyholders on repairs or remediation. I know I've spoken about the time frame of 12 months. I appreciate Representative Lambton's proposed amendment that would increase that to 18 months. We would prefer 24, but 18 is a positive step in the right direction. We do have concerns with 4B, establishing a point of contact. Again, this is the underwriting process. There are already contacts in place if you have a question, concern about a claim that already exists, and this is just creating a duplicative process. 4D, I know that there was a proposed language, and we do appreciate that proposed amendment about keeping it consistent with states' current cancellation non-renewal timeframes. I think that's very important for consistency purposes, so we do appreciate your work on that amendment. And I would just kind of end it with, I think as we're looking at this, in terms of whether it's the 12 months or 24 months, I think what's really at the heart, what is important is that the images provide clarity and accuracy regardless of the age of them, and that really should be the standard for their use in assisting insurers with their decisions. So I will stop there, but I'm happy to answer questions as we continue on. And I did not say anything mean. It's very complimentary. I appreciate everyone's work on this, so thank you.
Impressive. Impressive. I'm proud of you. You also didn't say the dad joke that you said in the Zoom call, and I won't force you to do that. I won't make you drone on about that. That was the joke. It landed. It absolutely landed.
I was upset I did wasted it on the call because I wasn't able to hear the groans. So I appreciate you bringing it back.
You'll have another shot. You'll have another shot. Thank you, Hillary. We have Paul Martin of NAMIC next. Paul, please go ahead.
Most important thing I will say today is today's number is 6. We are 6 Saturdays away from the start of the 2025 college football season. That's what we do. The trades come here. We bring unity. The Democrats, the Republicans, no matter what part of the country you're from, we bring you together. I will not say anything ugly either. Try not to do anyway. I echo everything Hillary said. Representative LaBeouf, we support your amendment. Representative Lampton, we also support your efforts as well. The only thing I'm going to add to this is really just to expand just slightly on what Hillary laid out very well. The resistance you're seeing from the industry on this issue is we are taking a technology that we've used images for decades in this business. Adjusters, agents, field underwriters have taken Polaroids. When I got into this business and I would look at files and it was literally Polaroid photos of someone's roof, someone's house, someone's deck, whatever. We're treating a select type of image different than we're treating everything else. That's the challenge here. And as you come to us and you talk about affordability and availability, and we get that, we need the tools to make things more affordable, more available, to get better at pricing, to get better at underwriting. So we really want to make sure that if there's going to be limitations on our ability to use the technologies, that we're still able to use them in a way that are efficient and effective, and we don't have a vested interest in people not being able to fix their properties timely. If someone says if a company says this house really needs a new roof, rather than non-renewing them, we would prefer, everything else being equal, they get a new roof and that they stay on the book of business, right? So we just want to make sure that we are not hamstringing the ability to use what we think is a very viable, a very good, at the end of the day, a very consumer-centric technology to continue to bring products to the market and create products that are affordable and available for the consumers. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate that. And the reminder about college football. Next up, Amy Bach, the United Policyholders. Thank you so much for being here. Looking forward to your comments.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. It's a little, I'm a teeny bit discouraged. I thought we were a little farther along on this model than it maybe feels like we are, because I thought we were coming in here kind of, unified. There are a number of the amendments that have been taken that seem fine, but I just want to kind of revisit why we're even here. You are all public officials. You're all elected officials. You all have constituents. United Policyholders has been helping your constituents across the country since about 2017 contend with what's become sort of the new normal, which is that there are suites of, there's technology available to insurers that were not available to them in the past, that is having a really dramatic impact on availability and affordability. So while I certainly understand my colleagues' concerns about, well, that they like the way it is now, they get to use the images however they want, and there's not really any restrictions, that is really hurting your constituents. It is really having a very dramatic negative impact on availability and affordability. So I'm not really sure I see the connection between drone images and bringing products to market. What I see is across the country is this. Let's see. You already, I hope you all know about our organization, 501c3, 3.5 decades of work, 3 programs. We're funded by donations and grants. We are working in Florida to support hurricane recovery. We're working in LA to support wildfire recovery. We've worked many years in Colorado on wildfire recovery, also on Hawaii. So while we pay attention to how the products perform after disasters, our focus right here, right now, is on availability, is the fact that more and more, when I talk to regulators all across the country, when I talk to some of you, you are hearing from your constituents that they are losing their insurance. They are losing their insurance on the basis of, often, aerial images that they have not seen, and they didn't know what the problem was. All they know is they've lost their insurance and they're scrambling. And when they go to replace their coverage, they have far few options. And this is not just a problem in the coastal states. I think you all recognize there's a large connection between the technology that insurers are now accessing and their underwriting decisions. We've had I would say, a pretty radical departure from traditional underwriting to tech-influenced underwriting decisions. And so I think what we're trying to get to here, I think we have actually, is a balanced approach where we are appropriately responding to a new phenomenon that's causing substantial harm to property owners and stakeholders. We're talking about not just homeowners, property owners, we're talking about lenders, we're talking about realtors and local governments. We're seeing a pretty dramatic impact of the aerial images, as well as AI, et cetera. So what are we talking about here? To give property owners the benefit of the knowledge about their vulnerabilities and opportunity to cure. It doesn't prohibit aerial surveillance or reasonable underwriting decisions. It advances the goal as it's drafted now with I think the amendments that were taken before the meeting. It advances the goal of reducing risk and keeping structures insured, and with the amendments, it avoids conflicts with current state laws on non-renewals. We completely agree that 30 days is not enough, but respecting that not all states have moved yet to increase it. Many states have, but that I think the drafting note approach is a good one. So this is just from Money Talk News just this past week. Can a home insurer drop you due to aerial photos? Brace yourself. Insurers are increasingly using technology such as drones. Okay, coast to coast. Virtually no homeowners is safe from this. The Wall Street Journal reported in April that insurers, the resource that they are using, can use airplanes to take images of homes of at least 99% of the U.S. population. So we're talking about pretty much everyone in the country being affected by the practice that we are here just trying to set some reasonable suggested guardrails on. The bad news arrives when insurance companies have been dropping people, and you'll be hearing from Kelly Campbell after this about the new FAIR plan that had to be created in Colorado because the market options are just really not there to the degree that we need them. And again, it's predicted that the situation is going to continue to get worse in terms of more and more people getting dropped on the basis of these images. So the proposal is very modest, in my opinion, in terms of the burden it imposes on the insurers. I mean, as far as should the images get sent automatically, I'm embarrassed to say. I just got a camera speeding ticket when I was in New York last week, and boy, that notice came with the photos, and I could see there's my car, there's the license plate, nothing, so I really don't think it's a huge burden to include the images automatically, and to add that additional step of the person having to request it seems to me ill-advised. So what does the model do now? It sets reasonable limits on a currently unregulated practice. It ensures that the photos used for underwriting will be reasonably current. It gives the property owner information about risks associated with their property that they may not know but should know. It gives them a chance to correct any misinformation and stay insured. It appropriately rewards the property owner that takes action to reduce risk. It provides an essential incentive that people need for investing time and money into risk reduction property improvements that they know if they do something, they're not going to have just wasted their time and money, as it is now. And the sponsors have taken numerous amendments, including giving insurers flexibility to non-renew for a business reason, unrelated to what the aerial images show, and then, of course, shortening the amount of time. So in wrapping up, I want to say, if you decide you want to exclude commercial, I don't think, that's not, to me, a reason not to vote yes and advance this model and adopt it. On excluding excess surplus, I just want to put a cautionary note out there. Just this week, we got notice. I had an agent call me and say in California that one carrier is non-renewing all their DICs, difference in condition, all their condo, and all their renters policies, and another insurer, a very high-end insurer, is moving a lot of their customers to their non-admitted subsidiary. And just to keep an eye, I understand that a lot of you in your markets are grateful that you have more non-admitted excess surplus carriers picking up residential risks, because that can be a better option than the FAIR plan. But we got to keep an eye on the situation, because it is increasingly now the mode for admitted carriers to create non-admitted subsidiaries and move their customers over to those not regulated entities. And you just want to think about where that's going. Not participating in insolvency funds, not having responsibility to contribute to the FAIR plan, not having their rates and forms approved by regulators. It's just a slippery slope. So I would really caution against that express carve-out. And I think that's pretty much what I wanted to contribute. I do appreciate all the work that's gone in, and I really would encourage you to vote to adopt this model.
Thank you, Amy, and appreciate your work to support consumers. Last, we always do this. Wes, it's always nice to see you here. My notes have Big Eye Wes,
That's me, I guess.
which is now your nickname. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In advance, I'm going to reserve the right to be mean. Maybe take advantage of that at some future point. For those who don't know me, I'm Wes Bissett. I am Senior Counsel, Government Affairs for the Big Eye, the Independent Insurance Agents and Brokers of America. We have state associations and many agents in all of your states. We are the largest agent and broker trade association in America. And I am here to urge you this morning to adopt this model, ideally today. We are strong supporters of it. We thank the sponsors, Representative LaBeouf and Representative Lampton, for their work on it. It is a very timely and very necessary proposal. There is no doubt that there are many, many benefits associated with the use of aerial images. But what my members are increasingly and too often facing is that the images used by insurers are either imperfect or are leading to inaccurate conclusions. State regulators are beginning to act on this issue to the limited extent that they can, but what we need is a thoughtfully crafted statutory framework, and we also need interstate consistency, and that's where you can provide with this model law. I agree with Amy 100%. I think this is a very reasonable and modest and straightforward proposal. When I look at it, I think there are at least four core elements to it. The first is it addresses the permissible age of images that may be used. So, images that are used as the basis for making a non-renewal determination should not be stale. And we think it's not too much to require them to be from within the last 12 months. Second, the model addresses the ability of policyholders to see the images that are used so they can see the problem that the insurer is alleging. To us, that's pretty much common sense. Third, the model addresses the ability to challenge an insurer's assertion. So if the insurer has gotten it wrong, there ought to be an ability for the policyholder to make that case back to the company. And then finally, the opportunity to address and remedy a problem. So if an insurer is about to non-renew a person because of a particular issue, it seems common sense that the consumer would have the ability to remedy that problem. And as an aside, I agree with Amy and others, the legislators who've already made the comment. We think that homeowners, if they're going to be non-renewed, should always at least get a 60-day notice in advance of that happening. Mr. Chairman, when I was coming into the meeting this morning, I was reminded about another issue that's on your agenda for a number of different reasons. It was about 23 years ago that NCOIL adopted a model law regarding the use of credit information in personal lines insurance. That model was sponsored by a legislator from about 50 miles away who was also an independent agent. Unfortunately, he passed away literally 4 months after that model was adopted, so he didn't get to see it, how broadly and widely it was adopted across the country. But what was happening at that time, in the late 90s and early 2000s, insurers began to very aggressively use credit reports and insurance scores, and that was wreaking havoc in the marketplace. And so NCOIL stepped up with a very thoughtfully crafted, reasonable model law that addressed the issue. Like the aerial image proposal before you today, it said very modest guardrails and established consumer protections. It's interesting to look at some of the things that are in that proposal. This model is going to be on your agenda later today. It did things like require that the credit reports and insurance scores that are used not be stale. They have to be from within 90 days or less. It established an error correction process. It established an appeals process. It required that if you're going to take an adverse action based on an insurance score or credit report, that as a company, you have to deliver certain information to the insured. So all those sort of elements, they're not, the elements you see in the aerial image model today are not unprecedented. They were included in probably the most successful NCOIL model law that was ever adopted, the one from 20 plus years ago. So we think this is a thoughtfully crafted, ready for primetime model law. If states feel like they need to make particular changes when it gets to their states, they can certainly do that and have at it. But we'd urge you to adopt it today, and we think it's great public policy. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Wes. Appreciate your comments and connecting this to a successful model from the past. I agree with a lot of what you said. Can't imagine we have legislator comments or questions. I know we do. Representative Mayfield, you are recognized, and if anybody else wants to, please let me know.
Thank you so much. And maybe I missed something in one of our meetings, but I could have swore that there was a privacy concern that had not been addressed with the fact aerial images taking photos of neighbors' properties. And so I did not see that in this language anywhere where there is protections for the neighbors. So that's my first question. I do want to state that I prefer the 24 months as opposed to the 18, only because people just do not have funds just sitting in the bank like that, and some of these roofs can be very, very expensive. So I want to address the privacy issue. I didn't see anything in here about consent from the homeowner for these aerial images. I don't think that we should just arbitrarily be taking photos or pictures of individuals' property without their express written permission. I'd like to see a cause of action in here. So if you do take a picture of my property and I'm not your insured, that I can sue you for that. So I'd like to see a cause of action. Also, I want to prohibit sharing photos. If you're going to non-renew someone, I don't believe that that insurer should be able to share that picture or that reasoning with another insurer that that individual is trying to move to. So if anybody wants to address any of those issues, please.
I mean, thank you. I think on the privacy issue at the Charleston meeting, there were a number of the vendors here, and I think they talked about the fact that they already have automatic face blocking technology so that you can't identify a human being in the photos. So I think that may be why there's no mention of it in here. As to the consent piece, I think they're doing it now. I mean, Google Earth, Google Maps. I mean, so I think it's a federal.
But that's a little
privacy
bit different because Google Maps is not denying you insurance.
Right.
So that's why I'm saying I think there needs to be some consent from that particular homeowner. If you're going to use this as a basis for denial, then you need to have their express written consent to take that photo.
Understood. I think that might need to be a separate model because I feel like it's kind of a sort of a separate issue. You don't see it that way. I get it. I hear you. I just feel like the privacy issue is different from what we're trying to get to here, which is to help people hold on to their coverage and keep
No,
their
and
homes
I
in-
get that. I just want to see some extra protections for the homeowners. So are we going to address cause of action if I'm the neighbor and you're taking pictures of my house and sharing those with other insurers? You know, we live in a very litigious society.
Indeed, we do. On the cause of action piece, generally speaking, a company is going to have the ability to conduct underwriting. That is just part of the inherent contract. We would obviously not support creating a cause of action for this. When an insurance company is getting this information, they are really, at the end of the day, they're asking for it on a specific property basis. They're not necessarily needing the entire city, every roof of the entire city. What they really need is to be able to look at a particular policyholder. In terms of creating a cause of action, I'd be curious as to, you have to figure out what the damages would be, but it goes back to the whole idea of affordability and availability. And if we're going to have more restrictions put on the use of the technology, becomes much harder at the end of the day to use the said technology. If there are concerns represented that if you have ideas, we're happy to certainly address those. It has been mentioned that some of the regulators are looking at this. I think I mentioned in Charleston that at least 6 states have issued bulletins on this that have worked both for, I believe, for consumers and the industry. So I think there are already sufficient protections out there.
I'm going to have to just push back a little bit on that because I guess my concern, and there's a bigger concern about the individual that's actually taking the photos and sharing those with, they can sell them basically on an open market because, we do things like that. So I want to make sure that the homeowner that is that the insurer that is asking for a specific home, that only that home is the one where the photos are being taken and shared, and that the individual taking the pictures cannot then share those pictures with other, let's say, roofing companies, construction companies, that those things cannot be shared. So there is that piece of it as well.
Yeah, I guess my response would be, and I'm maybe getting a little over my skis here, so Hillary can bail me out if she needs to. There are vendors who do that. I mean, it's not that the insurance company necessarily has a drone or an airplane or a helicopter or whatever. And the vendors have been here previously and spoken to you about the procedures they have in place to protect the information. So, not trying to dodge your question. I guess at the end of the day, that's probably more a question better sent to the vendors who actually are in the business than to the insurance companies.
Right, but if the insurance company...
I'm sorry, ma'am. We're going to have to move on.
Okay, all right, but there was one more question that they did not address.
We've got 4 or 5 other people in the queue. I will put you at the end, and,
Okay.
and in case that question hasn't been asked, we can get back to it. But we do have other things on the agenda today. So, and a lot of this, to be fair, has been discussed in previous meetings as we've been discussing this. The next person in the queue is Representative Sarge Pollock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, you made the comment of aerial photos way back. Representative Lehman used the one-step Polaroid cameras back when he started as an insurance agent, if I'm not mistaken. It's here.
Allow me time to respond at some point.
It was. Aerial imaging is here. This is obviously a hot topic again. And it's interesting to see how each of the companies are using aerial imaging. I talked to one of my good friends here this week, and their intent of their aerial imaging is basically going out, looking at the homeowner's property 6 months prior to renewal to give them the heads up. This is what we're seeing. Get with your agent and explain what we're seeing. And that makes perfect sense. It really, really does. And then on the other hand, you've got some companies that says, hey, you're non-renewed because we're seeing this damage without any collaboration back on what happened. And as a homeowner, I'm a 2-story house. I don't know sometimes until the leak comes through my ceiling. So anyway, those are different, again, scenarios that we're talking about. And again, this is a hot topic, and I appreciate the input. I guess my question is, I want to be really super clear. If we're voting today on this, that we're including Representative Lampton's amendments on this, and again, prior to we get to this point, if that's but it seems to me right now there's a lot of talk still happening. So, Mr. Chairman, I just want to make that point to make sure where we're at prior to us asking for a motion of voting on this today. So, I guess that's my first question. I may be referring back to you, Mr. Chair, or what that looks like, but where we're at, just so I'm clear on what we're trying to get accomplished this morning. And then the other question is to the imaging and including the homeowner in the process. And again, I made that point with the images and those type of things. I think is super, super important on this whole process, and that is included in this model. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to ask you that question, please.
Sure. Short, concise question. Appreciated that. During my first cup of coffee this morning, I was under the impression that we were going to be voting on this today, but by my second cup of coffee, it became evident that we probably won't be. It's clear to me, and to Representative Mayfield's questions, it's clear that there are folks that still want to engage on this issue. We usually have interim meetings between our in-person meetings. I would be of the opinion, as much as I agree with the folks that like the model and want to see it passed today, that I want to get a good product to the states. And so my feeling right now is that we should kick this to at least the September interim meeting. And we have 4 other people in the queue to ask questions or make comments. And if I get the sense that there's sort of a consensus there, then we will probably not take action on the bill today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Next up, relatively new member, Lehman. Is that a Lehman from Indiana?
Thank you. I don't want to waste time, so I'm not even going to talk about the NBA playoffs. I'm not going to address using Polaroid, black and white Polaroids for photo taking back in the early 1990s. But it does kind of lead to this, and that is I think we are on a technology cusp because we're seeing more and more and more technology being used. I think Wes brought up an excellent point with the credit scoring. I was here when we did that. I remember talking about that. That was a heavy lift because that was not an easy task because it really was driven by an impact on the market. We had to make a public policy decision. And the public policy decision is on facing us today. And that is this. You have consumers who may not or may know what their roof is happening on their roof. They're simply getting a notice and saying, hey, you're out in 45 days, in 30 days, and I don't have time to cure. We got to find a path that says, look, there's some reasonableness to this, but there's also some, and one person asked me, what happened? Guy's got a big hole in his roof. Okay, I get that. You don't want to insure a house with a big hole in the roof. But I got a notice 2 weeks ago from one of my carriers that the guy's missing 3 shingles. It's either fix or non-renew. And it's like, you're giving him a little bit of time, but not enough time. There's got to be a bounce somewhere. I will address one thing from an NCOIL standpoint. I'm not sure there's too many that have been around as long as I have, unfortunately. But process is very important to this place. And one of those processes is we do talk about amendments. Normally we have those amendments when we adopt them, I would like to see us have an interim call where we actually adopt this. I think it needs to be adopted. I think we need to move forward. I think there's some nuances here and there that need to be drafted so we can see them, we can tweak them, we can make changes to them. What I don't want to do is open this up to 45 more amendments, because I think we got to be very laser focused, like we did with credit, that this is about public policy in this one space. And so I think there's time to cure, there's non-renewal issues on timing. I think the model is there, but I think from a process standpoint, with wanting to see the draft of those amendments and know exactly how those are worded, I do think we have an interim in September. And then from a process standpoint, whether we pass this today or pass it in September, we don't go into session until January. We don't draft our bills till December. So there's time to get this in the right place, but I think just delaying it to delay it is not a good idea. But I think there's some things we can work through. And I'll tell you right now, if I call up a carrier today and say the word roof, their blood pressure goes up 100 points. It is just the most insane thing right now in the market. And they've taken action. They've taken higher deductibles, ACV on settlements. They're taking action. Let some of that set before we get so deep into this new technology. So I think this, again, piece of the puzzle, right? We can get there. We just got to exhale. Let's get this in the right place, and let's move this, I would suggest, in September.
I appreciate that, Representative, and that's a good example of the importance of institutional knowledge. I don't. That was actually sincere. You know, we talk about the term limits that are robbing the people of more opportunities to be represented by me in a few years, and in your continued involvement here is important. Appreciated you bringing up that contextualization of the credit report stuff, and it really does. It makes a difference, and I appreciate those comments. Representative Walker, actually Senator Walker, I apologize. Senator Walker, by my vice chair, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to commend Representative LaBeouf and Lampton for bringing this timely model legislation to us. I'm from Georgia, and we have had a very big problem with this aerial imaging underwriting. It's proliferated over the last couple of years, and I will take exception, I guess, with the APCIA representative's comment that it's the same as climbing up on a ladder and getting on the roof and taking a picture. I think this is my impression, is they are carriers that are wanting to limit their exposure in our state, and they are using AI to review these images, and that's not artificial insemination. Which is kind of where I come from. That's what I thought AI was. But they're using, I think they're just using AI. I think they're just trying to get off a lot of risk, and I don't think it's fair to my constituents. And it's really kind of an urgent matter in Georgia. So as usual, I usually do agree with Representative Lehman and his view on a lot of things. I think we need to get moving on this, Mr. Chairman. I was going to introduce and pass, because I'm pretty good at passing stuff in Georgia, legislation to surrounding this issue in the 25 session, and I held off knowing that NCOIL was going to have model legislation. Model legislation, Mr. Chairman, if I'm correct, it can be tweaked in each state. I don't think we need to let the perfect delay the good on this, but I do agree with excluding the commercial policies. I've talked to the author about that, and that's probably in Georgia what we would do. And I think the comment, again, I'd like to ask the lady, since I'm supposed to be posing a question, I will ask the APCIA representative how she thinks a 24-month-old picture would provide accuracy, because you talked about accuracy on the photograph, and then you said 12 to 24 months. So that, how would a 24-month-old picture be accurate on the condition of a roof or whether a limb is hanging over a roof or et cetera?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. I think my comments have been that from our position that it's not so much the age of the image, but it is the accuracy and sharpness of the image, having a clear picture. Obviously, if you are in the current process, if you are you have an insured, unless you're sending out an adjuster to the roof, or unless the insured is proactively calling you to say, I have damage to the roof, unless you have an adjuster doing an inspection of the roof, you're not going to know of the damage until the adjuster is there. It could have been there 6 months, 12 months, and that's the same with an aerial imagery, that we are now finding out that there is damage there, and at that time, that is no longer in compliance with the current underwriting standards, and that is when the insured would be notified that there is action needed. If the insured, it is, and I would say I don't know that the process for aerial imagery is any different than the current underwriting process. If an insured gets a cancellation non-renewal, there is information how to contact their carrier, their agent, for further information, to dispute, ask questions, why am I being canceled? I mean, that exists already, so I don't know that just because the image is coming from aerial imagery, that's changing that process. But thank you for your question.
One last comment, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind. If we don't pass model legislation and have some uniformity across, hopefully, the country with this, I mean, I'm going to do something in Georgia. I'm sure there are other legislators here that are going to do it in their state, and I don't think we need to wait too long before all that, the horse is out of the barn. Thank you.
Appreciate that, Senator. Yeah, and to Representative Lehman's point, September is early enough, at least in our process in Oklahoma, to have the model passed and adopt it in our state, or file it in our state. So appreciate those comments. We have Representative, and I apologize, it wouldn't be a PNC committee if I didn't have one last name I can't pronounce, but Dietrich. I see, that's what my gut said. We have you, and then Representative Jordan after that, and Senator Theis. Always get that one wrong too, I apologize. And then we will have to move on because we're coming up on an hour of having this discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for everyone's hard work on this. I guess I am in the camp of I'd like to see Representative Lampton's amendments before we vote on this as well. So I like the September idea. My question is really for Hillary and Paul. Listening to you, what would it take for you both to feel like this model is ready for prime time? Because that's kind of what I'm trying to drill down to, so we can get to a final product on this. What would that look like for you? Or are you just opposed to the whole idea of the model legislation entirely?
From NAMIC's standpoint, I think we have concerns about making this a model. Not everything has to be a model. And that's not a diss on NCOIL, it's just we don't necessarily think that every issue that comes up that we necessarily need a model for that. In terms of what would get us comfortable to the point where we could say we are no longer going to oppose something here in NCOIL on this, I think with the amendments that have been proffered today, I think we are getting fairly close. Now we're talking about causes of action and privacy. If we go down that road, we're not going to finish this in September. I mean, it's going to be a long road. Not to say that we shouldn't have conversations about it. We're always happy to have conversations about it. In terms of, for NAMIC's perspective, I think we are fairly close. But we want to make sure that if we're able to use these images, that, let me phrase it this way. I don't know that I necessarily buy into that this is somehow analogous to the use of credit. The use of credit was a completely different tool for underwriting purposes. Here we're just talking about who takes the picture. it's just an image at the end of the day, whether it's a Polaroid in Representative Lehman's file or if it's a drone or an airplane. We're just talking about a different technology that takes a picture. So we really want to make sure that we are able to take pictures in a way that is cost effective, accurate, and that we can use those. And if we all have a vested interest in making sure, I think everyone here at the table would say this, we all have a vested interest in making sure that a policyholder undertakes those things to get their roof, their property, whatever, into a condition that it is insurable. We're all on the same page there. So I think we're close, but if we're going to continue to work on this and throw out, well, what about this and what about that, things that we've covered previously, it's going to be a long process.
And I know we're getting short on time, so I will just basically say ditto to what Paul said. I think we're very close with the amendments that have been suggested by Representative Lampton this morning.
Thank you for that. Representative Jordan, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Look, here in Louisiana, of course, we've already passed, legislation on aerial images. I think this is a little bit better. I'm talking to my chairman right here. He thinks it may be a little bit worse, but so it just depends on where you are on the subject matter. But I think part of the issue that I have is that sometimes we attack these issues in silos and not look at it as just a piece of the puzzle. And so one of my bigger concerns is not sending the pictures automatically to the insureds. And I'll take a step back. A few years ago, we had this issue of notice requirements to the insureds and whether we should still do it by mail or whether we should do it by electronic means. And I will tell you, some of the same people at the table, or at least some of the same organizations represented, said that, the new technology is email and we should be doing that. And while I was initially against that, the more I even talked to some of the advocates, they said, well, look, nobody checks their mail anymore. Email is the way to go. And so if we're using email and we're using portals and all these things, I don't see what the extra burden is. There's no cost burden associated with this. So I don't see the opposition or the burden in automatically sending these pictures to the insureds so that they can take a look at them to verify their accuracy and what have you. And I think even to Senator Walker's point, if we're using AI as a determining factor on some of this and we're not having a human involved in the process as we're discussing on other model legislation or potentially model legislation right now, then I think that's even more burdensome, or at least more of a concern. The last thing I will say is this. Although it is similar technology, I think the bigger issue for me is notice. When somebody comes to my house, they knock on my door, they go on my roof, I know that they've done that. We've coordinated in some way, and I think some other representative talked about collaboration with the homeowner. I'm not sure if that was Representative Lehman or someone else. But, or maybe it was Sarge, but whomever. But nevertheless, there is some collaboration when we do that. I don't know if an airplane is flying over my house or somebody's taken a drone and done that. There's no need to collaborate on that. I may not have notice on that. So I do think it's vitally important that when those images are taken, because there really isn't an extra cost burden on the company, that those pictures be sent to them. So I guess for Hillary and for Paul, I'm just trying to figure out why you would be opposed to that.
I think our members would tell you that there is a cost associated for that. I don't know that it is cost-free. In terms of the second part of your question, if you're going to require you give notice, I mean, would you be satisfied if the industry said we'll give all of our policyholders notice at the inception of the policy? We may fly an airplane or a drone, or our vendor may fly an airplane or drone over your house at some point.
It's not that type of notice. I guess what I'm saying is, just look, I get emails all the time. So, I mean, I'm not telling you it's cost-free, but it's certainly not burdensome for the companies to just send an email saying, hey, look, we took this image of your home. Here are the images that we've taken, and to upload those. I mean, whether that be in the portal, whether that be via email, you can say, look, it's in the portal, click on this link, take it to the portal, put in your password, you can see this. So, I mean, they're being stored somewhere. So it's no, I would contend that there's no extra cost because you're putting them somewhere on your server. So to even send them a link and let them go into the portal and look at it would not be an issue.
Representative Jordan, let's do this. Since we're not going to vote on this today, let us go back to our membership, see if we can come up with some parameters of what the extra cost is, and then we can have a conversation about that. Would that work?
I mean, that works for me, but I'll be frank with you. I don't know if there's going to be an answer that I would trust or believe.
Understood.
If you tell me that there's some enormous cost associated with it. It just doesn't logical. I mean, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I mean, but you can go back and talk to them. Yeah, I appreciate it. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Representative Jordan. I also would like to see the quantified information on the increased cost. Last comment is Senator Tice. I nailed it, did I not?
Thank you very much. So some of the comments that I've heard today cause me to believe that the process isn't as well understood as perhaps it could be, and maybe I'm the one that doesn't understand the totality of it. But one of the first slides showed that almost 100% of the households in the United States are going to be photographed with aerial photography in the very near future. So we're already there. Now we're talking about third parties that the insurance companies are then accessing in order to get access to those images and use them. And so it's going to be multiple companies accessing an individual third-party carrier or a third-party photographer trying to get that information. So if those pictures are already being taken, some of the commentary here, doesn't truly apply. But then finally, if I'm wrong about my understanding, please correct me. And then lastly, who actually owns those photos? So if you're accessing a third party and they have the photography and you're making use of the photography, do you have final ownership such that you could go ahead and move it forward and give it to somebody else? Or can you only access that information? Is that part of the contract?
I will tell you my understanding is that if anyone purchases those photos, you're purchasing a license to use the photo. You're not purchasing the photo itself, because those vendors may want to sell access to those photos to other insurance companies, right? So I mean, you're taken for a whole host of reasons. So unless the insurance company is taking the photo themselves or paying to have those photos taken, my guess is that those are, and we can certainly verify that, it's a license agreement and not an ownership agreement.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I know that there are other folks that want to engage on this. I would encourage you to find the folks on the panel after the discussion, just so that we, in the interest of time, can get to the other important items on our agenda today. Do we have any closing remarks from our sponsor?
Yeah, so if I could just give some thanks. So again, I want to thank you for the continued dialogue. I mean, I'm looking forward to September. I mean, again, this has been a very extensive conversation we've had for multiple meetings. Just some final thoughts as we're moving forward. This conversation about the age of the photographs. I mean, I got to tell you, 24 months ago, I was 10 pounds heavier. So when you look at some of the age of what has happened 24 months ago compared to what's going on now. I mean, I had a constituent who had a tree fall on her home, and that was the image that was used, even though she had made the repair and still got a non-renewal. And the concern I have about the notice period, about not the automatic notice, is that when does the clock start? So if I'm in a state with 30 days and I'm non-renewed, and then it takes the insurer 15 days to get me the photo, then I only have 15 days to cure. That is something that if the clock started when I got the photo, maybe there'd be some amenable nature to that, but I don't see the technology challenges with that. And I think that we have to create some of these guardrails around this, because we don't want to prohibit the technology. This is a cost-saving technology. But to be quite honest, there are oftentimes with many of the constituents in my district, which are direct consumer customers that don't have an agent that's an intermediary, they call up someone in Washington that's used a photo that that goes through a computer system, analyzes it wrong, and they don't have the opportunity to have the privilege of having someone to kind of be that intermediary. So I want to continue the dialogue, but do want to keep those consumer concepts in mind. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Representative. Representative Lampton, did you want to have closing comments?
I want to thank everyone for their input and their conversation. Our industry partners, the Big I West, or West Big I, whatever you're calling him. Representative Lehman, Sarge, thank you all for your input. I would like to see us go to the interim meeting and have the language and move forward. Appreciate it, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you both for being good stewards of this model and working well together. Again, was heartened to hear the cordial nature of that. All right, I'm skipping past all the stuff on here about a vote because we're not going to do it today. I am preparing myself to be offended by all the people that are leaving now because this is all they were here for, the aerial images. And I just want you to know I've got a drone outside taking pictures of everybody who's leaving this meeting early. That said, the next topic up for discussion is the discussion on developments in fair access to insurance requirements, commonly known as the FAIR plans. As traditional insurance markets tighten, FAIR plans are stepping into the spotlight. This panel will explore how these essential programs are evolving to meet the moment and what the road ahead looks like. We have Kelly Campbell, the Executive Director of new Colorado FAIR Plan that was just recently created and implemented, here to speak first. Kelly, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I am Kelly Campbell, the Executive Director of the Colorado FAIR Plan. The Colorado FAIR Plan is the first FAIR Plan in a generation. There are some other FAIR plans that have come about in the last 30 years or so. Texas, for example, started in the early 2000s, but that came up out of TWIA. So in fact, Colorado is the first FAIR plan in many decades that came out of whole cloth. So we literally started from nothing in Colorado. We had legislation signed in 2023. The governor seated our board in January of 2024. We completed a plan of operations in July of 24, and we began taking applications earlier this year. We started taking dwelling applications on April 10th, and we actually began taking commercial applications 2 days ago on July 17th. So I think for any of you that have been around the industry, you know that that's lightning speed to literally get a company up from nothing. So we did everything from, again, creating that plan of operations to taking applications in a year. So agent registration, the way the Colorado FAIR Plan is set up by statute is that any licensed producer can write in the Colorado FAIR Plan. We do not appoint agents. So, and customers must work with a licensed agent in order to access the Colorado FAIR Plan. We don't do any direct sales. We think that is a vital consumer protection because we have such a dynamic market and because there are so many different market opportunities, whether through your standard insurance market, through your excess and surplus lines, which you all talked about a little bit earlier, or the FAIR Plan. It is really important that consumers have that knowledgeable guide to help make sure they get to the right place for the right coverage for the right price for them. Applicants must have 3 declinations by admitted carriers in order to be eligible for the FAIR Plan, so someone can't come directly to the FAIR Plan. We really are built to be that market of last resort. But it is important to note that while there are requirements for declinations from admitted carriers, there are no requirements for declinations from excess and surplus lines carriers. So a Colorado FAIR Plan policy, you'll hear me say this a couple of times, we are created to address availability, not necessarily affordability. Colorado FAIR Plan policies do reflect the high-risk nature of the properties that we insure. So there are limited coverages. We are an ACV policy. We're not a replacement cost policy as drafted in statute. We do provide limited coverage. We have that basic DP1 fire and lightning policy. Individuals can choose extended coverages, which does provide coverage for wind and hail with much roof conversation today. There are some general exclusions within the Colorado FAIR Plan policy. We do not provide coverage for theft, water, liability, those types of coverages, those special forms coverages. So a Colorado FAIR Plan, different than some other FAIR plans, can be used as a primary layer or a primary policy with policies that stack on top of it. And the coverages that are available are similar in both the residential as well as commercial. Just to get some more specifics on what that coverage looks like, dwelling does have a limitation of $750,000 in ACV coverage. Commercial has a limit of $5 million ACV coverage. But again, and there is some coverage under dwelling for personal property. An individual can choose 0 to 40%, but that aggregate limit remains $750,000. There are some additional coverages for additional structures, debris removal, but again, that aggregate limit remains. The one key element on commercial policies, and I think this particularly comes into play in the context of condos and HOA associations in that commercial space, is there is a prohibition on breaking out buildings within the same complex of an HOA. So if you have a condo HOA that has 5 buildings, you're only eligible for one $5 million policy. Now, if you have a retail store and you have one retail store, using a Colorado example, up in northern Colorado in Fort Collins, and you have another retail store down in Colorado Springs, then you can access 2 $5 million policies. So this is just an overview of kind of what I've talked about. We broke this down in our structure. We do have similar charts like this to help individuals really understand what's available in standard market policies versus what's available in a Colorado Fair Plan policy. But again, because those policies are so different, vital that individuals do work with that licensed producer. Again, we are basic insurance. We know that customers do have an expectation of additional coverages. There's a lot of other requirements that may exist with mortgage lenders and what have you for additional coverages. So as is the case in many states that have fair plans, there are some DIC policies or those difference in conditions, difference in coverages, wraparounds. They go by a lot of different names. It is not uncommon in fair plan states to use multiple policies. So right now, Colorado has one DIC option available for consumers. Having a meeting on Monday, there are some other markets that are interested in DIC policies, but this is a little bit of kind of build it and they will come. So we have built the fair plan, and now we're starting to see at least a couple of these DIC options come in for consumers. So I want to talk very briefly about how we built the Fair Plan. Again, the Colorado Fair Plan is the first Fair Plan in decades to be built from the ground up. But we really tried to have 3 mindsets in mind. We wanted to be tech forward, we wanted to make sure we were financially stable, and we also wanted to make sure we had a scalable infrastructure. As many of you are familiar with in your states, we have seen the business in many fair plans explode over the last couple of years. We really had no idea what to expect in Colorado, how many policies we would do. We tried to do our best work to anticipate what that would look like, but we knew we needed to make sure that we had an infrastructure that we could handle 1 application or 100 applications in a day. So just on the tech forward piece, we want to make sure we do have our website out there. You're welcome to look at it. We really want the website to be kind of that key conduit for information, to provide basic information for folks. It has some basic tools. It does have agent search functions to help connect consumers with licensed producers that are registered in the Fair Plan. We want to make sure that they have resources like that chart that I showed you to really help consumers be educated consumers. Even when they work with a very good broker, we still want our consumers to be educated. Also, we worked, and I'll talk about this a little in a couple of different contexts, but we are trying to make sure that we do leverage some technology to make sure that, again, we can have that scalable infrastructure. So technology is a part of that infrastructure component for us at the Fair Plan. These are some of the partners that we use, obviously producers being our #1 partner. So I know Wes has left, but obviously producers are important to us. In regards to some of the other partners we do use Casualty for our policy administration system, Exceedance for a lot of our manpower. We use Zesty for a lot of our risk modeling, which I know ties into your earlier conversation. And we use ePay to make it easier for consumers to pay premiums. Financial stability, I think this is really the cornerstone. This is the critical component of all of this, is making sure that we do have a fair plan that is actuarially sound. So a key component of that is reinsurance, and I will talk about that in our scalable infrastructure as well, is we want to make sure that we can pay for reinsurance, that we have reinsurance to make that financially stable product available for consumers. Now, as the Colorado Fair Plan, we have a backup. If we run out of money, we go back to the industry. We assess the private market to help make sure that we can meet all our financial obligations. So we know our consumers are going to be taken care of. But when we are here as the Fair Plan to make sure that we have that safety net within the market, we also have an obligation to make sure that we aren't putting additional pressures on the marketplace. So we don't want to be going out and asking for assessments from the private market and potentially creating more pressures on that marketplace for consumers. We want the marketplace, whether it's the standard, it's the E&S, we want that to be the first and best place for consumers to go before they come to the FAIR Plan. But we are here if consumers need us. So we have the actuarially sound rates. We did have an initial capital assessment of $46.5 million. We did have a smaller assessment prior to that for operating costs. So overall, the cost to start up the FAIR Plan was about $50 million. This does anticipate reinsurance costs, average annual losses, operational expenses. So it is an all-inclusive assessment. And again, as I've talked about, the FAIR Plan is designed to address availability, not necessarily affordability, and that's where those actuarially sound rates come in. So in regards to that scalable infrastructure, we have purchased reinsurance to make sure, again, that we are financially stable, that we do have that financial backing, so whether we have one policy or 100,000 policies, that we have a reinsurance component that will make sure that we can take care of those customers and not put additional burdens on the industry in case we do have a significant catastrophe in Colorado. Our reinsurance tower is based on a 12-month view, so it will allow for us to grow, and it makes sure that, again, we can have coverage no matter how large our exposure gets. In regards to our staffing, we are using a lot of third parties for our staffing. That is, again, critical to our scalable infrastructure. Trying to get an entity like this up and running and then trying to train enough underwriters, making sure that we would have enough people on staff to do this in such a short amount of time is not something that we could do. So we found the ways to do it by leveraging technology to be able to build that infrastructure. Our policy administration system, as I mentioned, is through Casualty. But again, we are actually working on, in commercial, while we're taking applications, we are also working on building a system that will allow agents to be able to quote their own commercial risks. So again, that is going to allow us to leverage technology to be able to provide that marketplace option even more quickly, more efficiently for producers and consumers as we move forward. So that is a very quick overview. I know we're quick on time, so I wanted to go through it as quick as possible, but I wanted to provide an overview of all the work that we've done in Colorado. Every FAIR Plan is as unique as the state they represent. There's no easy button when it comes to FAIR Plans. They are all unique. You're going to hear from Frank about exactly how different the Massachusetts FAIR Plan is than the Colorado FAIR Plan. I don't think they can get much more different. And there's a lot of FAIR Plans in between. So it is a vital part of the marketplace, but it is also something that needs to be tailored to the individual state in which the FAIR Plan represents.
Thank you so much, Kelly. Next, we do have Frank O'Brien, very new to NCOIL himself as well. He was with the APCIA for the longest, but he is now in his new role as General Counsel for the Massachusetts Property Insurance Underwriting Association. Frank, it is good to see you. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and it's so nice to see so many familiar faces still around the table. So it's been my pleasure to join you for the last 24 hours here in Chicago. And of course, all right, well, we'll do this the old-fashioned way. So in terms of the basics, the Massachusetts Property Insurance Underwriting Association runs both the Massachusetts FAIR Plan and the Rhode Island FAIR Plan. We are the residual property market association for both of those states. The FAIR Plan operates in a way that is similar to how a traditional insurance company operates, at least insofar as Massachusetts and Rhode Island are concerned. In comparison to Kelly, we are a mature plan. Both Massachusetts and Rhode Island passed their legislation in the late 60s to put these plans in place. So we have over 50 years of experience, and we have evolved over time. One of the things that is a hallmark of how both the Massachusetts and Rhode Island FAIR Plans operate, we are not a state agency. No taxpayer funds are used, and we are closely regulated by both the Rhode Island Department of Business Regulation and the Massachusetts Division of Insurance. In terms of the coverages offered, unlike FAIR Plans from across the country, both the Massachusetts and Rhode Island FAIR Plans offer a wide range of policies, primarily in the homeowner space, that are virtually indistinguishable from the types of policies that are found in the regular market. So we provide an HO3, we provide an HO5. We don't provide a policy with all the bells and whistles. If you come to us, we can provide you with a DP1, DP2 policy. We can provide basic coverage. But the vast majority of our policies are pretty full coverage, both in Massachusetts and in Rhode Island. And the slides, which I know Will put in the materials, I've provided 2 slides which lay out a chart which go into the type of coverages that we offer. In terms of our growth, the Massachusetts Fair Plan, we've been experiencing steady growth since July of 2023. Our policy counts are up to over 200,000 policies. 203,000 policies, which actually makes the Massachusetts Fair Plan the second largest homeowners writer in the Commonwealth. New business applications are averaging an increase of about 5.5% on a month-to-month basis, averaging a little over 4,000 applications a month on a yearly basis. The Rhode Island plan has also been experiencing steady growth basically since February of 2023. While it has slowed recently, Rhode Island policy counts, and remember Rhode Island, the smallest state in the Union, a much smaller plan, while Massachusetts has over 200,000 homeowners policies in force, Rhode Island has a little over 13,000. New business applications are also beginning to slow in Rhode Island as well. Specifically in Massachusetts, we've got 202,000 homeowners policies, and in Rhode Island, we have almost 14,000. The vast majority of our policies in both Massachusetts and Rhode Island are in the homeowner space. While we offer a commercial product, very few are actually sold in the market. Most of our issues, most of our policies, vast majority of them are in the homeowner space, and that's where we're seeing the growth. We're not seeing growth in the commercial space. We are seeing continued growth in the homeowner space. And in both Massachusetts and Rhode Island, we're seeing that growth statewide. Over the past couple of years, the Massachusetts plan has morphed from an urban-centric plan to a plan that is about 1/3 urban, about 1/2, I got my math wrong here, so 1/4 urban, 1/4 suburban, about half in the coastal space. So we have a significant market share on Cape Cod, the South Coast, the coastal areas of the state. Similar type of market share in Rhode Island. Rhode Island, of course, is the ocean state, so we have a significant market share in the coastal spaces as well there. One of the things that we have been able to do in the last month or so, one of the things that I would point out to the committee is that if you've taken a look at one fair plan, you've taken a look at one fair plan. There are 30-plus fair plans and citizens plans across the country. And while some of the basic parameters are relatively similar, as was noted by Kelly, the Colorado Fair Plan is quite a bit different in its design and operation. Part of that is the age, the relative youthfulness, if you will, of the Colorado Fair Plan as opposed to the maturity of the Massachusetts Rhode Island Fair Plan. So we breed different approaches, but it's also different approaches in terms of the marketplace in those particular states. One of the issues that we had to deal with in Massachusetts, for example, we have seen significant growth in the value of the properties that we cover. So we had a $1 million policy limit for a number of issues, not the least of which is that in Massachusetts we operate in a very restricted rate environment. We had to come up with a solve for a problem where a tenement in an urban community such as Lynn, Lawrence, some of the neighborhoods of Boston, a tenement in those areas, that can cost you $1 million now. And it's not just $1 million home on Martha's Vineyard or Nantucket. $1 million homes are found across the state. We could only have rates for up to $1 million. So what we were able to do is, working with the agent community, we developed a program whereby we will cover up to the $1 million limit. The consumer goes out and purchases a surplus lines policy that sits on top of our $1 million. Typically, they go through an agent. There is a market for that on the surplus lines side of things. So we will cover the first $1 million. Surplus lines will cover the rest. If for whatever reason the consumer is unable to purchase that policy in the surplus lines market, either because it is unavailable or because it is cost prohibitive, we will still cover the property up to $1 million without a co-insurance penalty. So we are seeking to fulfill our mission to provide basic property insurance coverage. We view this as an interim solution. We're hopeful to have a more long-term solution as we go forward, as we continue to have discussions with the Division of Insurance, the Attorney General, and others in the Commonwealth regarding that issue. We do not have a similar issue in Rhode Island. We have a limit of $1,250,000, which at the moment is sufficient in Rhode Island. But we do envision a day in Rhode Island where we're going to have to increase that limit as well. Part of the reason for this is just simply inflation. It costs a heck of a lot more to repair a structure now, as many of you know, than it used to. So to fulfill our mission, we've had to devise ways to raise our limits. We're also very much involved in our dealing with a lot of other issues. If you look at the history of the FAIR plans, at least in Massachusetts and Rhode Island, an arson scourge in the 60s and 70s came to define the coverage and the responsibilities of the FAIR plan. We view climate change as our generation's arson. So we are working with the climate chief in Massachusetts, as well as state legislators and others, in terms of seeking solutions that won't disrupt the insurance market while providing adequate coverages to policyholders, looking for solutions that are cost-effective in terms of mitigation and resiliency. We're also seeing some of the more traditional issues, assignment of benefits, which is something that some of you in some states have seen. We are beginning to see some of the issues that have been faced in Florida, Louisiana, and other states creeping north in terms of assignment of benefit issues. So in conclusion, I appreciate the opportunity to visit with you again. I look forward to seeing everyone in Boston next year at the next summer meeting. And I want to assure the members of the committee and my colleagues in the industry that both the Mass Property Insurance Underwriting Association and the Rhode Island Joint Reinsurance Association, we remain focused on providing basic property insurance for eligible property for applicants who have been unable to gain insurance through the regular market. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Frank. We did find the slides. I'm not sure what happened to that. We're trying to determine right now whether we're going to provide the slides upon request or just send them immediately. So we'll let you know by September whether or not we're going to do that.
I'm just glad I printed them out on paper.
Are there any comments or questions? Sarge?
Just a quick comment. Kelly, Frank, thank you. Frank, good to see you back with us. Obviously, we know where you're from. When I speak, people know where I'm from. I'm from Kentucky. Just a comment, Mr. Chairman, and that is the FAIR plan in Kentucky started back in the 60s. Me being an independent agent, it is a valuable tool in my toolbox. We have standard companies, non-standard companies, fair plan. So with Oklahoma kicking the tornado alley up into Kentucky these days, we really can see the value of what that fair plan looks like. So just a comment on that. Thank you for your comments and the discussion here today, but just wanted to share that obviously it's a big deal for us here in our state of the Commonwealth. So just thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Sarge. A little bit of slander there, but that's okay. Would you like to respond to that, Kelly?
If I may, Mr. Chair, I just want to say, when you say it's a tool in the toolbox, that's often a phrase that I use as well, that we want to make sure that it is a vital tool in the toolbox. We just want to make sure that we don't turn it into a Swiss Army knife, that we make sure that that tool does remain that market of last resort, so that those other marketplaces, the standard market, the admitted market, that is really the best place for consumers, and that's where we want to make sure consumers land first.
Any other comments or questions from legislators? Great. Well, thank you both so much for your presentations. Apologies again on the slide issue.
It's going to be on the website.
It'll be on the website quickly. All right. Next up, folks, we're going to have consideration of readoption of model laws. I want to remind the committee that we have three options. One, we do not adopt and the model sunset. Two, we readopt for 5 years. Or three, we readopt until the following meeting if there are ongoing issues that we need to discuss. Does everybody understand that? And I am truly open to hearing what people think about each one of these. We are considering the Storm Chaser Consumer Protection Model Act, the Model Act regarding Medicaid interception of insurance payments, the Model Act to regulate insurance requirements for transportation networks, TNCs, and transportation network drivers, TNDs, and the Model Act regarding the use of credit information in personal insurance, which we heard a little bit about earlier. We'll handle them separately because there's different processes for each one. Starting with the Storm Chaser Consumer Protection Model Act, which you can find on the app and in the binders on page 150. The National Insurance Crime Bureau, NICB, has been working with Vice Chair Walker of Georgia on some of the amendments to this, and that was mentioned during our interim meeting last month. Today, we're going to hear a presentation about some of the proposed amendments, as well as issues about the model deals with generally, and then the committee can determine whether to readopt the model as is for another 5 years or readopt it on a meeting-to-meeting basis while potential amendments are being considered and developed. We won't take any action on the amendments today as they're still under development. So, Senator Walker, would you mind going ahead and making any comments before we begin?
Thank you, Chairman. So in Georgia, we've seen more and more frequency of severe weather, and so we've had problems with people that are, displaced from their home and kind of in a dire situation and panic, and contractors, unscrupulous contractors coming in and taking advantage of that situation, and oftentimes getting the initial payment from the insurance company to make the repairs and not showing back up. And so we in Georgia, I carried some legislation to address this already, passed it in the 2025 session. We already had some fairly good legislation on the books in Georgia regarding roofing, but I expanded the consumer protection under our Fair Trade Practices statutes to include all contractors, but I kept it specific to homeowners and not commercial property, because I feel like commercial property owners are, they're not displaced from their home, first of all, and they're generally a little more sophisticated on dealing with contractors. So we limited it to homeowners, and we limited it to counties that were declared a state of emergency. And I appreciate all the help from the National Crime Bureau on this legislation. I would say that we, probably need to adopt it till the temporarily to the next meeting if that's the proper course of action, but of course, that's the will of the chairman and the committee, and, but I'm interested to hear them discuss the amendments proposed. Thank you. And it is interesting to me, Mr. Chairman, that I'm looking at the history of this. It was co-authored by a Georgia representative back in 2015. So the tradition continues that Georgia is interested in this issue. Thank you.
Yeah, richer than the Georgia Bulldogs, for sure. All right, thank you for your introductory comments. We are now going to hear from interested parties. We have Howard Handler for NICB. Howard, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Howard Handler, Senior Director of Strategy, Policy, and Government Affairs for the National Insurance Crime Bureau. Thank you for the opportunity to present today. As a reminder, I know my colleague Craig spoke the other day, but NICB has been around for 110 years. We sit at the intersection between insurers and law enforcement, and we have operations nationally, but we're headquartered right here in Chicago, and where I'm at. Hopefully you all, by the time the end of the meeting, got to eat some good pizza and some hot dogs here, so we appreciate the meetings being held in Chicago. Storm chasers, we all know what they are. They travel to communities to target vulnerable consumers in connection with an insurance claim, often exaggerating storm-related loss or intentionally damaging property. From 2020 through 2024, NICB has seen a 45% increase in roofing questionable claims. Questionable claims are suspected fraud referrals that member companies submit to NICB and then are transmitted to the respective state insurance fraud bureau. NCOIL's adopted Storm Chaser Consumer Protection Act is a very good model, and we urge readoption today. But its focus has been, we are urging readoption at some point, but its focus has been primarily on roofing and roofing-related services. I do want to take a moment and point out that there are other non-roofing related bad actors that also storm chase. Tree cutting services, mold remediators, smoke and fire restoration companies, contents pack-out companies. Those are companies that remove inventory, clean up, and store contents from a property after a disaster. And the bad guys involved in those industries, they're engaged in the same schemes as the bad actors within the roofing industry. So to highlight a few examples, the first one I'm highlighting here is a Florida-based tree removal company that chase storms all over the country. In some cases, they actually performed the work, and in other cases, they subcontracted to local tree companies, but then handled the insurance building. NICB has scores of cases open on this company, and 4 different state attorney generals undertook legal action against this very one company. Some of their shady practices include providing no written estimate and assuring the homeowner that insurance will cover 100% of the billing. Use of AOB, assignment of benefits. Homeowners reported being asked to sign blank screens on iPads. Billing for unnecessary or unused equipment. Billing for basically contrived OSHA compliance. This was one of my favorite. I was talking to an agent about it. The billing had compliance for specific OSHA standards, and then when our agent went to look up those standards, they have nothing to do with tree cutting or anything related to the service provided. Double billing insurers of adjacent properties for the removal of one tree. So one tree fell on 2 different properties, and each property's insurer was billed separately, so essentially double billing. Placing or threatening homeowner liens when there is pushback on the billing. So right here is an example, a real-life example from this tree removal company. This is an actual invoice from Indiana. This was the removal of one single tree that fell on a house. Obviously, it probably was a decent-sized job. The tree fell on the house. They billed for 3 different service visits for a grand total of $150,000 to remove one tree. Just a couple other case examples. We have a Maryland Contents Packout Company with scores of questionable claims. Some of their fraudulent practices include charging for after-hours work during regular business hours, packing contents in parts of the home that were not affected by the peril, applying a higher tax rate than the jurisdiction requires, and then presumably pocketing the difference, and then charging for pack-out and storage of contents that were completely destroyed by the peril, so there was no need to pack them up. Just one other quick case in North Carolina, mold remediation company. They forged the signature of a 94-year-old homeowner and then fabricated $57,000 in water damage claims. So again, we support the eventual adoption of the storm chaser model, but we do have some suggested amendments to the existing model, including expanding the scope to services beyond roofing and roofing-related services, increased transparency for property owners, prohibiting the assignment of benefits, and prohibiting attorney referrals and financial incentives from attorneys to contractors. We've seen much of those suggestions. They were modeled off of a Kentucky House bill, but we've also seen success as a result of 2 Florida bills passed in 2022 and 2023 that institute several reforms to curb shady contractors. Our operations department is reporting, subsequent to the enactment of those bills, a reduction in out-of-state unlicensed contractors descending on the state, and also a reduction in questionable claims. And that's it for me. Happy to answer any questions before I pass it on to Simon or Brent.
Thank you, Howard. I appreciate that. And after this, I want to hear your recommendations for tavern-style pizza, not necessarily deep dish pizza. I just wanted to plant that idea in your head for later. Next up, we have Colonel Simon Blank, the Director of the Florida Department of Financial Services Criminal Investigations Division. Colonel Blank, I feel legally obligated to say that we look forward to your comments because I don't want to get in trouble.
Thank you. We'll take your recorded statement later. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Walker and other committee members. As you indicated, my name is Simon Blank. I oversee Florida's Department of Financial Services Criminal Investigations Division. We are the ones responsible for investigating and prosecuting insurance fraud in the state of Florida. So we're usually fairly bored and have nothing to do, as you would imagine. I would like to say that thank you for the opportunity to give you a little insight into some of the challenges and some of the trends that we, as the enforcement component, see not only in Florida but across the nation within this topic. So let me start by saying that as a state that sees substantial abuse, especially after significant events like storms and hurricanes, we would like to commend NCOIL for the proposed Storm Chaser Consumer Protection Act and express our support for the passing of such an act. In Florida, we see contractors continually canvassing neighborhoods and telling homeowners that there has been some type of a weather event, whether it's hail, storm, or what have you, and that they either see some type of damage or that they're willing to offer them a free home inspection to make sure that there's no damage in their residence that needs to be repaired. A common theme usually happens where companies come in and try to do the roof inspections, commonly exaggerating or fabricating damage to the property and offering to help the homeowner file a claim and have the homeowner actually enter into a contract. In cases where we do have a legitimate storm or hurricane in our state, which seems to happen quite often, we see out-of-state unlicensed individuals coming into our area, immediately traveling to the impacted zones and pretending to be legitimate businesses, even displaying actual company names on their vehicles. Most of the time we see these individuals coming into our state and pre-staging before the hurricane actually hits in the area where the hurricane is supposed to, the eye of the storm, or traveling in the middle of the storm, which is something that no legitimate company would do and put their employees at risk to do such a thing, right? They utilize day laborers. They usually pay cash. They have no insurance. They pay no taxes. They typically perform substandard work that doesn't meet any of the requirements in the areas where they're operating, or never complete the work that they started. A lot of times what we see is that they collect money or down payment and actually never complete or do any work. Unfortunately, what happens is once you end up with one of these groups coming into a neighborhood and starting to do work, other homeowners who are impacted and suffering see that company and hire them to do more work for them. So if one of these unscrupulous companies or contractors or groups makes it into a neighborhood, they end up victimizing multiple people within that area. A new trend that we're seeing in Florida, and it's starting to take place throughout the country, is contractors using language within the agreement that locks the homeowner for the whole value of the estimate in the contract and holds them accountable for the difference on the estimate if the insurance company doesn't pay for it. And what happens is then they're placing liens on those homeowners for the difference between the estimate and what the insurance company actually agreed to pay. They are also adding language to these contracts, making the homeowner responsible if they change their mind on the contract or choose to go with another contractor, and makes the homeowner responsible for a set amount of money to be paid to that contractor, regardless of who does the work. Once again, ending in the homeowner facing liens against their property. I use roofing as an example, but as Howard has indicated, roofing is not the only problem. The same is happening with tree or debris removal, tarping and wrapping of roofs, water, mold remediation, and quite a few other sectors. In the last 5 years in Florida, we have received over 15,000 fraud complaints associated to homeowners insurance fraud. The problem is so big in our state, and the demand on our agency is so great to investigate these cases, that the Florida legislature has actually appropriated the funding and allowed us to hire 18 additional personnel to investigate these issues. In the last 4 years, that group has looked at 5,000 referrals or complaints coming in. They've investigated 788 cases and actually managed to arrest 226 individuals for fraud being committed. What we commonly see are seniors who are signing multiple allegedly free inspections and are then being held responsible for the charges by multiple contractors after a storm. We also see homeowners who put down deposits or pay cash in advance to companies that never do any work. Significant overbilling and price gouging is taking place, and Howard already gave you many examples, so I won't bother or bore you with them. Just suffice it to say that in Florida, there's no lack of imagination, so if you can think of it, we've probably seen it or are thinking about doing it. To address the problem, in addition to the changes that the Florida legislature has implemented during the last 5 years, our agency has needed to deploy teams to any weather or significant event area to make sure that we educate the homeowners and the local authorities as to what to expect immediately following the event. Those teams include other regulators, so we make it a point to bring with us not only our sworn law enforcement officers to take care of the problem, but also members from agent and agencies who oversee the adjusters, members from the Department of Business and Professional Regulations who oversee a lot of the contractors that operate in the state. We also use workers' compensation compliance, which is one of the biggest concerns during repairs, and the statewide prosecutor's office to assist us. We also emphasize through social media, public service announcements, and actually have taken to using temporary road signs to raise awareness in these impacted areas. We conduct sting operations and wait for contractors to approach us and make an offer or try to do some repairs, or we actually go out and call those that are soliciting the neighborhoods to make sure that they're operating properly. And lastly, our agency or department has implemented a web page that says, "Check my contract." And what they do is they actually offer to review all the contracts that these homeowners are signing to make sure that they're legal and they're not predatory in practice. During the last few storms, the Chief Financial Officer of Florida has issued emergency rules with some suggestions that I think are worthwhile for NCOIL to consider. Some of them include contracts entered during the issuance of an executive order may be canceled without penalty or obligation within 30 days after the date of the loss or after the date the contract was executed, whichever is longer. Independent adjusters who represent multiple carriers are considered to be representatives and are therefore required to review and acknowledge receipt of communications with the insurers within 7 days, which is a law that we have passed in Florida here this year. And all adjusters verbally interacting with an insurer are required to identify their adjuster appointment types, such as public adjuster, independent, company adjuster or adjuster apprentice, and explain their role in the claims process, plus identify who they actually represent in the claims process. And we also prohibit desk adjusters from modifying any initial estimate without providing a detailed explanation as to why that change was made, to include the identity of the adjuster who's responsible for making those estimates. Once again, I would like to commend NCOIL for a Storm Chaser Consumer Protection Act model and suggest that some additional considerations be made. The model does not appear to address AOBs, which has been a big problem in the state of Florida for quite a few years and is now impacting other states across the country. And I think that some of the areas that the CFO addresses in his emergency orders might also be of benefit to your plan. So with that, let me close by thanking NCOIL, Mr. Chair, again, Representative Walker, and all you esteemed committee members for allowing us to be here. I'd like to extend our support of your draft and also obviously offer our support in anything that you may need from us. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Howard. Appreciate that. Colonel Blank. I apologize. Next, we have Brent Walker for the Coalition Against Insurance Fraud. Brent, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the interest of time, I'm going to keep this extremely brief, and it's easy to follow the National Insurance Crime Bureau and Colonel Blank. I just want to remind the group, there is a solid foundation. This is a good model. The Storm Chaser Consumer Protection Act does protect consumers not only from being a victim twice after a disaster, but I think that what Senator Walker in Georgia and Kentucky did this year with 2 enacted bills also opens up the opportunity to modernize the existing model through some amendments. So the Coalition Against Insurance Fraud does support the readoption, but I do believe there is opportunity to modernize, expand the definition to include other than roofing contractors, not only to protect the consumer, but the honest businesses who cannot compete with those who cheat the system. So we support the readoption with the opportunity to amend it.
Thank you so much, Brent. I appreciate that. All right. If there are any comments or questions from legislators, we can take those now. Frankly, love that. Love to hear that. I agree with you, Senator, that we should try to reauthorize this for another till the next meeting instead of for the next 5 years. Appreciate everybody's input, and I'm looking forward to our ability to expand this and make it more consumer friendly. So at this point, I'll entertain a motion from you if you'd want to extend. Great, and it's got a second. All in favor of extending this model until the November meeting, please say aye. All opposed, don't bother. The ayes have it. Thank you so much for that one. Obviously, we're running a little bit late because everybody this is everybody's favorite committee. So we are going to move on to the Model Act regarding Medicaid interception of insurance payments. As a reminder, we had during our interim meeting, we were offered an opportunity to comment on those models, and we hadn't heard anything since then. So today we're not going to take any testimony from interested parties. Are there any questions or comments from legislators about that model? Fantastic. I will entertain a motion to readopt this model for 5 more years. Second, all in favor, please say aye. All opposed, please don't say anything. Great. That we're just doing a great job. That I don't know what I'm supposed to say. I hereby declare that it will be the law of the land for the next 5 years. Next up is the Model Act to regulate insurance requirements for transportation network companies and transportation network drivers. This has been one of NCOIL's most successful models. Almost every state has adopted some version of that model, and you can see it in the website and the app and on your binders on page 132. During the interim meeting we had, some interested parties expressed an interest in working on some potential amendments to this model, similar to the Storm Chaser model. So today we're going to hear a little bit more detail on what those potential amendments might be. I'm going to encourage that we do the same that we did with the previous model, to readopt until the next meeting as opposed to the next 5 years while these potential amendments are being considered. I do also just have to point out how nice it is to see the two of you here not discussing rentals. So please, I think we will go with Brad Nail representing Uber first. Go ahead, Brad.
I think the word that you want is decree. I think you should be allowed to decree things from your chair. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will be very quick. You laid the groundwork for the success of the model. It's been a hugely successful model. These were nascent businesses at the time, and the model really did get just about everything right. We have begun to make some adjustments to the statutes in your states to reflect some of the changes, some of the things that weren't really foreseeable 10 years ago. So if you're seeing some legislative activity around TNCs, that's really what it is. And we think that there is an opportunity for you to consider some of those issues and whether the model should be updated to reflect that as well. There are 4 key areas. I'm not going to go into detail. I'll just list them for you. Number 1 is vicarious liability, where the TNC has no negligence. Number 2 is product liability claims. Number 3 is independent contractor and statutory tests around that. And then number 4 are the statutory limits. And the first 3 are really around the rise in litigation that has occurred over the last few years, specifically against TNCs, and ways to clarify the statutes on what responsibilities are there. So one other issue that you may be seeing some activity in your legislatures is around uninsured motorist limits, where a handful of states set very high limits for TNCs separate from anyone else, and we're trying to bring those in line with the model, but that's not an issue that requires amending the model. The model got it right, and we're trying to get the states, those states in line with the model. We've already had some discussions with APCIA, with NAMIC, and so our intention is to continue those discussions and bring in you guys, the committee members, and other interested insurance stakeholders to produce some language between now and the next meeting, so for your consideration of whether to amend the model. And so our ask today really is what the chairman specified, which is to readopt to the next meeting, and knowing that we'll be continuing to work on that.
Thank you, Brad. Appreciate those comments. Next up is Derek Woolley, representing Lyft today. Derek, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. We appreciate the opportunity to be here today, and I actually would like to say I appreciate the sponsor of those donuts. They were fantastic. I probably didn't eat any, but I ate 2. So thank you very much for that. But I would echo Brad's comments and something you touched on. I just want to mention NCOIL really took a leap of faith with us 10 plus years ago to help create a framework that built really an industry. And that industry is proliferated around the world in different models, as we've seen. So we really appreciate your efforts, and because of your efforts, we've been able to prosper and build something for consumers. But the second point I'd like to just make is we really appreciate NCOIL's foresight into readoption of these models, because over time, such a new industry, there has been some modernization efforts that are needed, as Brad mentioned, that's taking place in the legislatures today. And we just really appreciate the opportunity to share some of that data that we have with members of the committee and other interested parties, and really looking forward to working with them. And we also recommend readoption to the next meeting, and really work with those interested parties to get that data and get the right messaging into those legislation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Derek. Congratulations on the donuts. And I want to thank everyone for driving the policy on this issue. How about that? How about that for a grown joke? Please, someone tell Hillary that I beat her. Remove the chair. You're going to vacate the chair. Are there any comments from legislators on this? Great. Okay. I do think that because we're having some ongoing discussions that we should readopt this until November as opposed to the next 5 years. I will accept a motion on that, Senator. Seconded. All in favor, please say aye. All opposed? Excellent. Great. I decree that we will follow up on this one in November. Thank you, too, for your contributions. Next up, and for those keeping track, we have 2 left. The next is the Model Act regarding the use of credit information and personal insurance. This has also been one of NCOIL's most popular models. Half of the states have adopted it in some form or another. As a reminder, during the interim meeting, we did offer an opportunity for comment on these models. Didn't hear much, so we're not going to be taking any testimony today. Is that true? Jill, are you speaking on? I'm so sorry.
Nope, I'm speaking on travel.
Great, you're just way ahead of time. Love that. I'm not that prepared usually. I love that. Appreciate that. So we're not going to hear any testimony on this. I do think Representative Lehman has a comment. Oh, Representative Mayfield and then Representative Lehman, and then we will entertain a motion to readopt.
Okay, I am strongly opposed to readopting as currently written. One of our constitutional officers here in the state of Illinois, Alexis Julianis, who is our Secretary of State, actually filed legislation to remove credit score as a determining factor for auto insurance. Our State of Illinois requires auto insurance for everyone, and we have found the practice to be discriminatory. There's been several news articles on this, and again, as I stated, he has filed legislation. We've had several House committee meetings on this particular subject. We have data here within the state of Illinois that's very unsettling. An individual with an excellent credit rating and a DWI conviction actually pays less for auto insurance than someone with a poor credit score and a great driving record. So we know that there is something wrong with this particular system of using credit scores for auto insurance. So we want to make sure that that is removed. So I'm interested in actually providing an amendment that would remove credit scores from the determination of auto.
Thank you for your comments. Do you have the language for that amendment?
I can get it to you.
Okay.
When do you need it by?
Well,
And who do I submit it to? Because this would be my first time submitting that amendment, so.
It would have been ideal to have had it before the meeting, but we can discuss this after Representative Lehman's comments. Representative Lehman?
Yeah, my comments are just because this was an issue that I carried in the past, and we amended it in the past. I think there's always opportunity for changes. I do think it has worked. There were some concerns on what it would do, and I think it has worked. I just want to make sure the industry is aware that we will continue to monitor this, because I do think there are some carriers we're seeing that kind of are getting outside the skis on some of this, but overall I think it has been a good bill, and I would recommend we re-adopt it today.
Thank you. I'm so sorry, I can't see.
Senator Hasegawa from Washington State.
Will you, can we get him a microphone? Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Bob Hasegawa from Washington State. I just would like to add my voice along with my colleague directly across from me. Washington State is taking a close look at this. We got a budget proviso inserted into our recently adopted budget for our OIC, Office of an Insurance Commissioner, to actually do a study on this, because we have the identical concerns that my colleague across the way had. So I would encourage giving us a little time to complete that study to validate in what we think is discriminatory and disparate practices or results from this practice using credit scoring in making some of the rate determinations. So I appreciate your hearing me out, and would not support adopting this for another 5 years at this time.
Thank you for your comments. I appreciate that. Representative Jordan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Look, of course, I'm not sure exactly what study that the representative is referring to, but I can tell you in Louisiana, I brought a bill banning credit, and it was some information based on Consumer Federation of America and Doug Heller, who actually I had present here on this subject a few years ago. In light of that, though, and I know the representative said, I think she's fairly new, and would like to offer some amendments, and the previous models we've renewed until November. I would just ask that if we could consider doing that until November, give them some time, give the other representatives some time to finish their study, and then in November decide whether we want to go forward for 5 years or not. And so I don't know if Representative Lehman would be open to that amended motion.
So, first of all, I'm the chair. If that's okay with you, Representative.
I'll
yes.
defer to the chair.
That sounds like you've made a motion. Do I have a second? Second. Great. I tend to agree, and I appreciate you bringing those comments. So we will, all in favor of adopting until November? Please say aye. All opposed? Okay. Thank you so much for that. This is the point of NCOIL, and I appreciate everybody being flexible on that.
Mr. Chairman.
Who? Oh,
Pardon me.
Senator Walker, yes.
Can I just make one comment on this issue?
Seems that you are already.
As Vice Chairman of the committee. So whether or not your state wants to allow the use of financial modeling or credit score or financial scores to underwrite insurance is not, to me, that is a different issue from having a model bill that protects the consumer if the state decides to allow the use of financial scores in underwriting. So I think we're getting two issues kind of conflated. If your state is going to allow credit scores for underwriting and pricing of insurance, you certainly want this model legislation to protect your citizens. This is a consumer protection measure in the case that you're going to use credit scores to price insurance. So the fact that you don't like credit scores being used in underwriting or pricing insurance is kind of another issue, in my opinion, respectfully. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And it looks like we're getting a preview of the discussions that we'll have in September and November ahead of another vote on this. Thank you so much for your engagement on this. Last on the agenda is a discussion and potential consideration of proposed amendments to the NCOIL Travel Insurance Model Act. The model is on the app and in the website and on page 168 of the binder. The model is not scheduled for its standard 5-year readoption today, but Representative Lehman has offered up some technical changes to the model just to clarify a couple of things. Representative Lehman, would you like to go ahead? I appreciate that. I'll ask Representative Jordan if he's okay with you thinking that it's okay to do it. But before we have a vote on that, I want to hear from some industry folks. And because Jill got to the table first, you get to go first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I promise to be very brief because I'm sure that you're thrilled to be hearing from the life insurance industry at the end of your property and casualty meeting. These amendments, as Representative Lehman mentioned, and thank you very much for sponsoring them, are necessary to ensure that the model allows life insurers to continue to file business travel, accidental death, and dismemberment products under the accident and health line. The model currently only allows for the filing of travel products under, as he said, the inland marine line. The changes would also track the NAIC model language, which does currently allow either line, as well as legislation that passed this session in New York. We are requesting the amendments in advance of the 5-year readoption period. Because of the increased legislative activity we're seeing, we saw this year in at least 6 states, including New York, which passed, and some states are making this change and some are not. And if the model were clarified to allow this, it would just be a lot more straightforward for the states to adopt this. So again, thank you to Representative Lehman, and we would ask you to consider adopting the amendments at this meeting.
Thank you for your
And I'm Jill
comments.
Rickard with ACLI. I'm sorry, I didn't even introduce myself.
I apologize. I also did not say that that is Jill Rickard from ACLI. But that was Jill from ACLI. Next up is Carrie Cutry. Did I get that right? I'm sure I didn't.
Carrie Cutry. I'm with MetLife. And I'll be brief as well. I just appreciate the committee hearing us on this model. We agree with ACLI's comments, and I just wanted to be available because we do sell business travel accident insurance. It is something that employers buy, which protects their employees when they're traveling from from accidental death or injury. And it's always historically been filed as an accident and health product. So I agree this is a technical change that we're seeking to be consistent with the NAIC and just address this kind of inconsistency that we're facing now. But I'm also happy to answer any questions if anyone has any. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carrie. The last minute addition, Duke DeHaas, and I can't remember where you work. So please tell us.
Thank you. Is this on? Good morning, Mr. Chairman,
or good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'll keep my 20 minutes of remarks down to 20 seconds in the interest of time. Thank you for the opportunity of Duke de Haas with Allianz Partners U.S. travel insurance company of Allianz, and I'm also co-chair of the U.S. Travel Insurance Association Law and Reg Committee. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. This is one of the more successful NCOIL models. We're very grateful for the work that's been done by NCOIL on travel insurance since it adopted the model for the first time in 2017. At the time, one of the big problems around the country was split filing, which was some states requiring the product to be filed on both the A&H and P&C sides of the department. As a result, the inland marine only language was used upon subsequent discussion and deliberation by the NAIC, which didn't move quite as fast as NCOIL did, passing their model the following December in 2018. We learned that some companies, like good folks next to me, didn't have P&C certificates of authority because they're, after all, not on that side of the house. So we added the flexible language in the NAIC model. It's probably one of the only times I'll support an NCOIL model being conformed to the NAIC model. I want to again express my gratitude for NCOIL for all their work on this over the years. 40 states have now adopted this, including New Mexico, Oregon, and Hawaii this year. Louisiana was the first in 2017, and we're extremely excited that, as mentioned earlier, thanks to the efforts of Assemblyman Weprin, Assemblyman DeLon, and of course, President of NCOIL, Assemblywoman Hunter in New York. We've passed both houses this year, and we await the governor's signature later. So the momentum is picked up. We are continuing to work on this around the country. Thank you again, and we are supportive of the amendments to preserve flexibility for all companies involved in this market. Thank you again.
Thank you, Duke. I appreciate that. If there are no further comments or questions from legislators, I will entertain the motion that Representative Lehman suggested we adopt his amendment. So do I have a motion to adopt the Lehman amendment? Seconded. All in favor of adopting Lehman's amendment, please say aye. All opposed? Look at that. Mr. Popular, congratulations. All right. That amended model will now be placed on the Executive Committee agenda for final ratification. I'm going to go ahead and say that I don't think that there's any new business before us because we're about 15 minutes past at this point. I do want to thank everybody who hung around. I know that this was a long and complex committee meeting, and there was a lot of discussion, and I appreciate everyone's engagement on it. Obviously, the September interim meeting is now the hottest ticket in town, and the November meeting will be longer than it was supposed to be. But that's what this is all about. So with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn and a second. All in favor? All opposed? Sorry. There will be about a 5 to 10 minute break, but then we're going to have executive committee in this room. Thank you.